welcome to our show, Film Talk with AJ Dean. I'm AJ Dean, your host, and Happy New Year! Happy New Year, everyone. And we have the best.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. It's so exciting to have both of you because you're both stars, just like the stars behind me. And we have a super special VIP double bill guests here. I'm going to say double bill because it's film, right? We have Lisa Lindo. She is a producer and literary manager, and also a lot more. And we also have award-winning author and screenwriter Edward Savio. Welcome to you both. I'm so thrilled to have you. How are you?
Great. Happy New Year, AJ. Lisa, how are you doing? You and I talk all the time, but it was just your birthday the other day. The world celebrates Lisa's birthday.
Oh, happy.
It's New Year's Eve. Thank you, sweetheart. I appreciate that. And I go around telling everybody it's my birthday from December 1st. And then I include New Year's Day because I go around saying Happy New Year to everybody. And so my official birthday season ended yesterday.
Happy
When
birthday.
I was done saying happy birthday, and I had really good friends visit. So it was just kind of perfect. And the weather was really beautiful. And we went around and did absolutely everything we wanted to do. And yesterday we went to our favorite park. So it's really good to see Edward. We talk all the time. We see each other, but not as often as we talk all the time. But it's always a pleasure to see you, AJ. And it's a perfect way to start the year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you so much, Lisa. And cheers to you and Edward and everyone out there. This is for blessings for an entirely spectacular and beautiful year, 2024.
2024.
2024, may it be prosperous, productive, and creative.
Yes. And speaking of creative, and cheers to you and everybody else out there. And thanks so much for watching, everybody. This is like our second year, like Lisa mentioned. And again, happy birthday, Lisa. You're beautiful, our beautiful Lisa. And Lisa, I just want to say Happy New Year. And also, can we have a look at your beautiful nails? You went out and did a special, you dressed
We're ready for New Year's Eve. I don't think you can see them, but they're ready. I'm already covered with confetti. Soon I will make the transition out of
so
it.
you have to
But
do
we're
it
not-
a little more slowly. Go
Okay.
give it a moment. There you go. There you go.
The thing is, it's not just celebrating New Year's Eve. We're celebrating 2 years of AJ Dean having a podcast. And I remember and she's now won awards and been doing it consistently and delivering with lots of great guests. And I'm really, really happy for you, sweetheart.
Thank you so, so much, Lisa. I love you. I love you both. I love all my guests, some more than others. But anyway, no, I'm just joking. That was a joke.
Way more than all the others. We're just being honest, is what we're
Sure,
saying
be
right
clear.
here.
Just being honest. But I do want to
Sorry,
say, I love that. I do want to say that speaking of podcasts, is it okay to mention? I mean, we can edit this out, but
Sure, no, you can mention.
is this news breaking that you and Edward, you might be having a podcast coming up?
Yeah, we're going to do a fun podcast. At the moment, there's a couple of titles for it, like "Don't Take My Advice" or "Don't Worry, No One's Listening." Advice, yeah, ED. Or "Don't Worry, No One's Listening."
Which I love.
We just go out and onto the balcony when the party's going on. Everyone's talking in there, and we're just having a private conversation. So if you happen to overhear it, you can stay and listen, but just don't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody. And you're going to be on YouTube, all over, right? Facebook, and we're going to be able to subscribe and watch your fun wisdom. I believe there.
Yeah, well, I don't know about wisdom, but will be fun and funny, and maybe you'll get something out of it from the non-advice, because one of the things that I love is I love talking to people and hearing the different ways that they do whatever they do. We're going to be talking to writers and directors and actors and, maybe even some scientists and things. But I want to feel like I want to hear and feel what they feel, because one of the things that Lisa and I have talked about as we're working together on different things is even when you're in different genres, even when you're in different worlds, business, whether it's business or the business, our business, there's a certain level of politics and interaction and, getting along with people
Oh, yeah.
and, navigating the world,
Mm-hmm.
and it's always fun. And there's also funny stories. And that's, I think, the most important thing is to laugh at ourselves.
The cool thing about Edward's podcast and how it evolved was we're currently like in the middle of dev for that. And we've talked to some wonderful people that like book celebs and celeb authors and authors that Edward, just sort of had a literary crush on for a long time. But we've developed a little bit of a partnership with Bookster. And so we have been working with Bookster, who has a wonderful following of avid writers and mostly avid readers that love writing and love reading books and love immersing themselves in that genre and sitting there. Not so much films, right? It's really about like the book, the act of making it through a novel or a series. And so we've had a lot of fun, and we've done a bunch of interviews with them. And it's sort of come out of that because every time Edward starts to talk about sort of how he writes or a specific tech that he uses
Yeah.
or a technique or his perspective on stuff that's coming out from the industry in general or of a specific genre or even TV or film, they're always like, that's its own show. Everything you're saying right now, I have not heard that before. And Bookster deals with everybody.
Yeah.
So he does have a really unique, which is why I love working with Edward, a unique perspective. And I'm just honored that we're a team, but really working with Bookster has been like a kind of great thing for us. Like over this last year, it's a weekly, like, strategizing and doing things for them and all kinds of really great stuff with their website, but really talking about from all the podcasts that they have and that they're continuing to add onto their roster, encouraging Edward to have maybe one podcast.
Yeah.
I'm super thrilled for you. It sounds so exciting. And I can't wait to see your first episode and who you have, because, I love authors and all different types of people and artists and everyone. So this is going to be fascinating. And I love that you love to laugh, both of you. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And I want to make sure everybody to watch out for that coming up from Lisa Lindo and Edward Savio. And that'll be coming. Would that be in the next few months or weeks?
Yeah, we're going to start doing tests by the end of this month. We'll do test podcasts and, which will never see the light of day as we work with friends and family.
That's like screenwriting, right, Edward? The beginning is you don't let anybody see that stuff.
The first draft of everything is shit. That's a quote from that's a quote from Hemingway, a real one, and it's true. So you just you just take it as it is and you see how it goes, because one of the things that I think is most interesting, and this happened with me in my career, I wanted to be a director. That was my goal. I wanted to be a director. Mm-hmm. And I wrote so I could try to film my own stuff. So I didn't end up doing that. And I ended up also being a novelist, which I never thought about. So you don't ever understand exactly where you want to go. I mean, I wanted to be a writer from when I was in 6th or 7th grade, but I wanted to write in service of directing. And so you don't end up always exactly where you are, but you have to go through the process to figure it out. So what this podcast will turn out to be will probably be slightly different than anything we have in our minds right now. But as soon as we lock it in, we're going to go, that's it.
Absolutely.
That's the thing.
100%.
And it's fun working out segments. That's really cool. Like, we're going to put this in and definitely going to do some of that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and definitely one of the segments I want to do is called Delayed Comeback.
Oh.
Where I go and I listen to last week's episode and I realize what I could have said if I had been faster and funnier in the moment and dub it over, maybe with the sound effects. So,
that's great.
And it's got to have the song Delayed Comeback.
I love that. I love that. And I love your applause. You're going to have your applause in there, right? Can we hear that?
Oh, yeah, we could. That's the tepid applause, with the slow hand clap, and then there's the big applause, and this my favorite is this one actually.
That's great. That's good. It's going to be a lot of fun. Well, I'd love to help you in any way. Like I said before our show today, I'll reach out to me in any way. I'd love to support you and promote you in any fashion I can. And I'm here for you to support you both. So, because I love you so much and I'm excited. And also, so did you, and this podcast also is great because it is film, it is video. So it's part of helping your dream come true in a way. Did you rewrite a lot of screenplays or TV shows or that kind of thing, Edward?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a ton of different. I've worked on both my own stuff and other people's things in rewriting. One of the things that's interesting um, about film is that I take a sort of a weird approach to writing in this way. My prose writing, meaning my novelist style of writing, has influenced how I write screenplays, and my screenplay writing has influenced how I write novels. I've always been very dialogue. Dialogue and banter between people is important. When I first started writing novels, I went the opposite way, where I was like, I need to get into the head of the characters in places that I couldn't get for my, for my screenplays. And then in almost all the books, before they've been published, I've gone through and either done a full screenplay or almost a full screenplay. And then I've gone back in and I've looked at the screenplay and said, okay, well, this dialogue banter here, how can I fit this back into the book? And in the opposite way, my descriptions where before they were, I'm still very streamlined in my descriptions because the director needs to have their vision, but I am more visually and I have a bit more of a deeper understanding. I just don't go, he walks into the room, he does this. There's a little bit more to the description. I can get away with it because I've done what I've done. Not everybody should put too much into their screenplays at first, but you should
in
do
the scene descriptions is really
in
what
the
he's
scene
like going.
description and the scene descriptions, but it's important to give people the real flavor, especially, to me, one of the most interesting things, I did this with someone else's project for Sony, where I had to take a book and work on the adaptation, and you have to see it differently in your head. I see the movie when I'm writing, whether it's a book or a screenplay, but it's a bit different. It's a bit more, it starts from here and then goes down to the chest when you're writing a novel. It's like into the heart, right? Because you're into the mind and the heart of the character. Where in a movie or a television show, you can have an actor give a frown, a nod, and give you all the emotion that I need to tell you or show you in a book in a couple of lines.
Yeah.
So that could just be a second on screen.
It could be.
I'm
I'm
a
sorry, go
big
ahead.
fan.
Yeah.
No, AJ. I'm a big fan of descriptions in screenplays. I know that you don't necessarily want to give a lot of stuff in there because it's really not necessarily stuff that'll show up on screen. But since I was in the business of selling screenplays for so long, I know that I'm giving it to someone to read who's going to make the decision to show it to their boss, who's going to make their decision to show it to a studio, who's going to make it, like it's going to go through some reading. And so a lot of times I prefer it if I'm working with an author or screenwriter who is writing for the reader, right? Mm-hmm. So this is not from one of Edward's books, but I use it as a quote quite often. The early on in the screenplay, it talked about a man who came in and he was wearing a suit that might uh, once have walked to work on Wall Street, but had long since forgotten the address. Okay.
Right.
So it gives you so much, but it is not dialogue. It's not coming out of the person's mouth. It's really a note to the costumer of the project, right? But it really does inform a great deal for the actor on what they came from and where they're going with just this little tiny thing. So I love that little extra, which is more a novelization of a screenplay in a way, right? It does tell you more in the way that a book would tell you more. I love that
Yeah,
about. That's my
yeah,
favorite thing.
and you look at like you could take a look at two different screenplays. You can, and you can find them on the internet. You can look up Pulp Fiction, and you can look up, Last Action Hero by Shane Black. And, one of them, Pulp Fiction, is going to be directed by the writer. And you look at it, and it's all dialogue, and there's almost no stage directions at all. Almost none, because Tarantino understood what Tarantino was going to do. And you look at Shane Black, although Shane Black has directed movies afterwards, at this time, he was doing what you normally have to do, which is you got to write a script to sell it, and you need to sell it to the reader first. The reader has to read it. The producer has to read it. The studio exec has to love it before it ever becomes something on screen.
Absolutely.
And
If you're selling to a studio, but either way,
yeah, and if
you're
you
going
read,
through levels of people that are going to give you money.
yeah, and one of my favorite moments in Shane Black's in Last Action Hero is there's a momentary sex scene. There's a sex scene, and Shane starts to describe it, and then says, I'm not going to go into any details because Jack, you don't get to know all of my sexual preferences or whatever or something like that. And it was directly speaking to the reader, like, hey, put your own stuff in there, and I'm not going to tell you my own. You have to do things. You've got to break rules, but you got to know the rules first, and you've got to hone which ones you can break and really feel comfortable, because when you break them badly, they really stand out.
That's so true.
You got to break rules with style, really. I mean, and also you've got to know them, just because the audience is expecting all of those rules to be followed.
Yes.
So every time you choose not to follow a rule, you are making a statement. So you want to do it with a certain amount of style, or a poem, or perhaps a statement on what the rule is while you're doing it, or something. So you're bringing in humor or whatever. But it's
yeah, I guess. But I think the thing that's important is really just doing it, and doing it like, this is the part that this is the part that I think people don't get. Like the first screenplay I ever made money on was probably the 7th one I wrote. Wow. The one that I wrote and made like my first studio sale was probably my 14th screenplay.
Wow.
And so, and the early screenplays were good, and they were funny, and they had a lot of things, and some of them after that first 3 or 4 or 5, actually, maybe it was like the 3rd or 4th that I got some little bit of $1,000 or $2,000 option here, and then then I would get like $5,000 or a $10,000 option, enough to survive as a starving person in Los Angeles in the 80s. But
was that Disney or Sony, Edward?
At that time, it was just independent, like, producers.
The very first one.
But the very first ones. The first one where it was a studio was Disney. Wow. And then Sony, and then Sony again, and then other people. But it was, it was independent producers who were either optioning something I had written or showing me something that someone else had written and go, can you do something with this?
You make an Americanized version of something, or
I'm making an Americanized version,
something in another language, or something. Yeah,
and there was a lot of that, and the most important thing for anybody is that you just got to do it. That the one thing that you think you're working on that you thought was your baby, can't be your baby. Like your really good idea. Yeah.
The things that got Edward that very first gig wasn't the first script he wrote.
Yeah.
That first script is not, yes, it is possible to write your first screenplay and have it
Sure.
be, the odds are less than Powerball. So what it is we were talking about this at the head of the show, right? It's really at the top of the show, it's really about your very first things you write. You want to write it like it's going to actually get made, but the truth is there exercises in that you will learn a tremendous amount of writing that first thing, and after a little bit of time away from it and going back, you'll go, oh yeah, yeah. And that's what we're saying, is that's not stuff you necessarily show someone, but you have to get through that process to get to something that now is you and the things that you've loved stolen, like put together, and
Yeah.
your sense of humor, and you're breaking the rules,
Yep.
and it's at a different level, but you don't start that. You just don't start that way.
Right.
What's that famous quote, right? No plan survives first contact, right? It's basically like any
I
war
love that
plan.
quote. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, it's like basically it's an idea about war, right? Any plan of attack doesn't survive first contact. So you can plan, for an attack, but as soon as you actually make contact with the enemy, you have the plan goes out the window because it changes depending on how they react. And that's very similar to how you have to look at writing. For everything that's made, what do you think, Lisa? 100 times?
The very least that are out there that don't get made. But I'll tell you this too. A lot of times when you get a lot of material in on a regular basis, whether it was when I was an agency, we'd get scripts all the time, solicited, unsolicited. You don't necessarily want to take these unsolicited scripts, but however they come in, if you're actually taking a look at it, you gave someone a release and you're reading it, you find trends because we have a collective consciousness. So people are exposed to the same little bits and pieces of news and history being uncovered and culture, and so to reach the same sort of interesting story point that you're writing about, not unusual. So you might get you'll get a screenplay about the spear of Longinus that killed Jesus, and then you'll get another about the like, what is it, not the knife of Longinus, no, it wasn't the dagger of Longinus. And you'll get like these like 3 or 4 different like scripts all at the same time. And these people think, I am the only who's writing about this. Nobody. I got it. And then you're like, so part of that is also you have to be so careful, because when you get material and you're kind of the person that is, we're Rocket Search and Production. So we're making our stuff. But if you get unsolicited material from the outside, you might be doing something in the same genre. And then later somebody can say you took it from them or you stole it from them, when really it's just out there at
It's
the
just
same
out
time.
there.
Yeah.
Which is why they always say it's all about execution. It's always all about your take, which is again why those little notes sometimes in the scene description put you apart from the other people.
Yes.
Yep. So one of the things I want to talk about right here is just the third book. This year has been really interesting. This past year, 2023 was interesting.
Strike sucked. Things sucked.
Strike, terrible. Yep. I had 2 books come out, and one of the things that's really bizarre is that the third book in the Battle for Forever series came out in League of Old. It's especially great at this time of year because people understand the word now, Auld Lang Syne, right? AULD. My favorite is looking up, like if you look up on Google and do League of, and it'll populate with old, OLD, a lot. But hey, better than not populating.
Look it up. At least it's not Leagues Under the Sea. It's us.
That's right. So, it's been so much fun, and working this year with Ray Porter, coming in and taking over a really tough job for Will Wheaton is so great. And Ray came in.
The first 2 books in the series was Will Wheaton.
Will Wheaton did the first 2 books in the series, and Ray came in, and Ray is just, I don't know, man. Ray is so, he's such a pro, and I have been turned on to authors through Ray Porter. Like
Those of
I did.
for those of our audience, who is Ray Porter? Just to give, could you give us a brief summary?
So Ray is an actor and a narrator. Ray has done a lot of. He's Shakespearean trained, and he's just this. He was, and also he's played Darkseid in the DC universe, and he's just got a great presence, and he's a funny person.
Twice narrator of the sci-fi narrator of the year, reading the book that became a audio book of the year, Project Hail Mary. He has a bunch of other projects that he has worked on over the years, but he's in Zack Snyder's Justice League, which is like kind of the biggest thing. So he keeps playing that character in Justice League. Almost Famous is what
Almost Famous is what I was talking about. Yep,
Oh.
trying
Almost
to
Famous.
remember that. But Rebel Moon, huge, right? Which everybody's talking about because it's now because it was this last year.
Yep.
So he's got a lot of work where he's worked as an actor on screen, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also, I mean, when you're doing audiobooks, there's only so many authors and so many narrators that are have such an incredible built-in audience and fan base, and also really are kind of like the 400-pound gorilla. Like when they are part of a project, the project really succeeds. And Will is one of those people, you know, having done the Martian and Ready Player One and all these incredible titles. And Ray, also having done incredible titles, is one of our favorite people. And so there was no question that he was someone we wanted to work with, even when we were working with Will. But Will not being available and being able to book somebody else was just like, and Ray doing it and being available for it, was just a gift from heaven.
And one of the people I'm going to definitely have on the podcast is going to be Ray, because Ray and I have had, when we were first sort of in our engagement Zoom where we were talking about where Ray wanted to find out whether Ray wanted to do this or not, we had set a time for about a half an hour, and 2.5 hours later, we're all talking and laughing and having a great time. And, this is a man who makes his money with his voice. So when he's talking to you,
yes, it's big.
Actually saying words, it's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And I want to say thank you to Lisa for looking that up. And I want to say a special shout out. I don't know if Ray will ever watch this, but I hope he does. And I'll be watching him on Edward and Lisa's podcast. But
I'm going to make sure.
Right? Say special hello
and
thank you, Ray Porter. Amazing. Just amazing.
Yeah. And Ray is so much fun. And, and then to go then have this other thing from going from sci-fi, action, adventure, and comedy to this absolutely not safe for work, completely just over it. It just very personal, very funny take on. I believe we have 3 times when we grow up. The Velvet Sledgehammer. We have 3 times. We have one. There's the beautiful artwork.
Yes.
There's the first time when we kind of hit puberty / teenage years. We have that coming of age, 17, 18, whatever. And then we have this other one when your kids are sort of like adults, and they're out of the house, or they're about to be out of the house, and you have to find out who you are as a person as you go through the world. But there's this middle one where you figure out if you even should get to the third one, where you even should have children. If your experience as a young adult, dealing with your first coming of age, dealing with your parents, that you are even prepared for children and a long-term relationship. And that's what Velvet Sledgehammer explores. We have to take a test and get licensed to scuba dive.
Yeah.
Nobody asks anybody anything before you can have a kid.
Isn't that something? And you have to get a license to drive a car.
Got to get a license to drive a car. Got to get a license to get married.
Yeah.
No license to have a kid. And if there ever was something that should be tested, I think like, that is the one thing. Like, are you ready for this
Are you ready
experience?
for adulthood?
It's a beautiful.
And
Adulthood.
Yeah.
just like working with Ray, who was really wonderful and did so many things and worked with, like, he does everything for Andy Weir and Jack Carr and Jonathan Mayberry and all these amazing authors. With this book,
Hmm.
Edward's the narrator on the audiobook.
I love that.
So he brought that personal moment where it mirrors it within his own personal life to this semi-fictionalized story about a trade negotiator in the what's time period is the
1993 when they created the WTO.
and so there is really an incredible trade negotiator that he sort of bases it on. So it goes on from there, and he goes off to arguably one of the most difficult trade negotiations of his life, full of humor and pathos and brilliance, and has to relive memories from his life, deciding, like, do I even have good enough role models to do this? Am I appropriate at all to be the kind of person that actually is in charge of another human? And that is the Velvet Sledgehammer.
And the Velvet Sledgehammer, and the funny thing about the Velvet Sledgehammer, right, is, I had finished this a while ago, and one of the parts of this was it's not a problem like with Me Too, but during the Me Too sort of like everything happening in Me Too, this was not going to be looked at. It could be looked at by people who are super sensitive. It's definitely about sex and love and fear, and there's a lot of comedic moments in here from my real past, based on about a lot of real things that went on, and I tell them honestly, and I thought number one, my family would never speak to me.
If they knew.
If they knew. I thought number two, like anybody I knew, I was just like, they would just know my deepest, darkest secrets. And the funny thing is that the response from people, there's people who don't like it, but because it might make them uncomfortable because they have to think about real things in life. But
or they're used to his sci-fi more,
used to my sci-fi, or they're used to my they're used to my lighter sci-fi. This is like deeper stuff, and I'm okay. I'm great with that. But what I've been shocked at is not only how many people have responded to this, especially women, which is really the thing that, women read more than men, number one. Mm-hmm. But people have said, I felt this way. I had this moment. That's like my family. My father was like that. I experienced those things. And some people even have been like, I now understand what the other person was thinking. Women have said, now I understand in this experience I had, what the man was thinking in this moment. And men have gone like, you put this out there. And, and so it's just funny. And
okay, so
I just want people to check this out. Go ahead.
Okay, Edward has, from my perspective, in the more than 20 years that more than 40 years, I don't want to say it, but it's a lot of years that we've known each other. From my perspective, he's had two great loves. The one he's with now for more than a decade, and the one that he made babies with that I introduced him to, who they're still like really close best friends. They all vacation together and stuff. So the first one, when I introduced him to her, was at a very large event. I had talked about him before to my best friend, and I told her that he'd written a novel, and it was a really long novel. It was really good. So in the loud party, I pointed him, and I go, he's the one that wrote the big book, him. She cannot hear what I'm saying. She only sees him.
Big.
So she goes, love his life. That's how that started. When he started dating Kira, who he's with now, who he's like moved across the country to be with, and they're a fam, and it's beautiful, and he's given everybody COVID, and it's wonderful. that he's adores. One of the things that happened early on was he gave her the manuscript of Velvet Sledgehammer. And reading that manuscript, she fell in love with him. And so
Oh,
she's been on him ever since to put it out. We've been putting out a lot of material, but it just sort of wasn't one of the ones that we were focused on. And
Yeah.
then,
And then
yeah.
so anybody who reads this, there's a moment in this book where, like, the best gift I've ever gotten in my life, was lost.
mm.
And, I don't want to tell you how it was lost or anything like that, but it was just, you'll understand. And but I was 9 years old, and it was just one of the most, it caused me to have a different view on life from that moment on. I didn't care about things as much.
Was this growing up in Connecticut?
This was growing up, yep, in Connecticut. And Kira, after reading this, the first time I got to the first holiday, she gave me the thing that was lost.
Oh,
She found it. I mean, this is 30 years later, right? You have to try to 40 years later, you have to try to find it.
Did you
And
cry? I would have
I
cried.
I was it healed me.
mm.
Oh,
It healed me.
I'm
It healed the
tearing up like it's
wound.
such a thing. Like it's so
Yeah.
beautiful. So careful, people. You might fall in love with Edward if you read this book.
This is it. Yeah.
Yeah, right?
And one of the things that was so important, and I talked with Ray about this. There's a moment where in our last interview, I love it. He got to laugh so hard. I'm like, Ray, how your finished hour, meaning, however long the book is. If the book takes 15 hours to listen to, how long does it take to record that? And for the pros, they're like 1.5 to 2 times. So if it's 15 hours, they've recorded for 24, 25 to 30 hours, right?
Whoa.
You know, uh,
Wow.
maybe they're fast. They're pretty fast. Sometimes it's pretty close. For me, and
366 days,
I mean,
42 hours. No,
it was about instead of 2 to 1 or 1.5 to 1, it was like 9 to 1. It was like 9 hours for every hour that was finished. And I think that's even conservative. I don't want to admit how long it took. By the end, I'm much better now because I've learned. But one of the things that
Labor of
happened,
love. Yeah.
one of the things that would happen is that there were moments where I'm reliving this moment
Mm.
where that my favorite gift was lost, and or dealing with a loss in my life, and I had to read it.
Yeah, that was going back in time, Edward. So you had to process all that, right,
I
Lisa?
had to process it, and when I'm writing it, it was different. It was, sure, there was emotion, but it's me going through this process of creating something and using my writer brain. I'm looking at it from the outside. How do I tell you this moment?
Yes, because right now you're advanced. When you're reading it, when you're looking at it in the past, it's already happened and done, and then you're reliving it again through the memory. And how did that affect you, Edward?
So when I was writing it, it was interesting. I mean, I could feel the emotion as I was writing, but it's a slower process. You're writing words. They're not coming out in real time.
you don't hear yourself telling the
You don't hear
story.
yourself. Yeah, it's freeing. It's amazingly freeing to write something so private and yet have people relate to it in such a way.
On its own.
On
its own. Yeah.
And to relate to it on its own, and to feel like I love making people laugh. I love making people think. I love making people, Google history because they read something that, I tell them something that doesn't is not portrayed normally in media about what really happened, and then if you look deeper you see it. But this here is more about, you don't Google this. You
Yeah.
don't Google what you feel.
This is real life. Yeah.
This is real life. This is like your heart. And so, um, you know, this is one of those things that, and I'm not joking, and I know my skill as a writer, but this here is something that anybody who's listening, you should try this. Try the book, return it if you don't like it, because honestly, I think it will touch you if you give it 50 pages, if you give it
Yes.
an hour listening to it, if you're listening to, the audiobook, I think you'll start to realize like what this story is about. And um
It's
it's
incredible.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
incredible.
And what's
There's
really
also a
interesting,
screenplay. I didn't say that out loud. I'm sorry.
no, well, of course I wrote a screenplay first so I could rewrite the book,
Yeah.
with the dialogue. But it's
A
really
year, 2 in 1 year. This is we did two in one
Phenomenal.
year with the first two books of Battle for Forever series,
yep.
but two different genres dropping in 1 year.
Yeah.
It was, and we're developing a horror project as well. So it's like it was a big year, considering it wasn't like certain things couldn't happen this year.
Yep.
This was really
Mhm.
such a ridiculously productive year, and lined up a bunch of stuff for 2024. His
Absolutely. And
history of working in audiobook, the whole genre, is fascinating. Okay, so when he first started, it was like a closet in his apartment in San Francisco. This many years ago, and he would work with himself, and he would work with some other people and different things that he had to specifically do. And that went from that process to one of the narrators that we've worked with. Edward developed an entire library of sounds that they
wow.
made so that
Wow.
he could go in and fix things. He can get every alphabetic sound that they could make, because when we work with a narrator, even when you work with editors, sometimes they leave in a lot of like slurping or sneezing or sniffing, or they might actually like it's a famous person and they leave a letter off at the end of the word, or they change it a little bit. We don't want to bother them or spend a ridiculous amount of money. So he learned how to work everything he's ever done that could possibly involve tech. He's mastered the tech to work on it.
Yes.
One of the amazing things about Edward, and there's been a lot of articles about that out there, but specifically by the time he got to narrating himself in Velvet Sledgehammer, he had this huge learning curve over the
Yep.
course of maybe 15 years, if I want to beat me somewhere in there, of constantly growing and learning not just the tech, but how to interact with it. So I had nothing. When we work together on audiobooks, what generally happens is I get it when it's done, and I listen to it with him on the phone. And whenever there's something that I'll either say it could be a different take, or it went too fast, or it went too slow, or there was too much space between things. That's it. That's my job, is as an editor when it comes to the narration. When we got something from Ray Porter, so everybody works differently. Will Wheaton works in a studio. Ray Porter has his own setup, especially since COVID started. A lot of people transferred to their own setups, but Ray has had his own setup for a really long time. And so
Blanket fort.
What?
Blanket fort. He
Blanket
has the
fort.
blanket fort. He has the
Blanket
blanket
fort.
fort.
Right. Blanket fort. And Edward has an entire basement that is a blanket fort for this. He has a whole huge setup with green screens and soundboards and this, and it's best, the big mic.
Yes.
Big
And
Mike is in you.
and
The
the big
big
mic,
mic.
and like the audio that we heard, the clapping, the applause before, you've become an expert at it. That's what's going to make it so much fun. And it is fun to learn these new skills and to have that at your fingertips. And what I love about your books, and I always have, is that you love the truth and you reveal facts about our world we normally don't get via the media, school system, education, colleges. And that's why I want to encourage everybody to get The Velvet Sledgehammer, and also narrated by Edward Savio. And then also, please check out Edward Savio's League of Auld, with read by Ray Porter, and then this other screenshot here on the image. We've got Alexander X, which is that's the second book, right?
No, that's the first book.
First.
So if you haven't read the book, if you haven't read anything in the series, to get to League of Old, you got to go through Alexander X,
Wonderful.
and
That's the beginning, right, Edward?
that is the beginning. Alexander X, and then the second book is Ancient Among Us. And for anybody who's just curious what this sci-fi is, it's about there's about couple hundred people in the world who they're mortal, they can die, they step in front of a train, they die,
Don't get
but
die. Yeah.
but they age, but they age only one day for every 100 days. So
I love it. And your books are so important. It's not just writing about a novel or characters. For you, it's the message of a purpose. There has to be something behind it. Isn't that right? You've always got that heart-centric importance, right?
I do, but I'll tell you what I'll tell you what I say about that. I don't start with that. Like I don't. That comes out, but I think if you focus on telling a truth, right? If you try to tell a story well told, and you do it with looking toward quality and never like giving up, like just because it's a little bit harder, you're going to find that place. Like I don't try to tug at your heartstrings to tug at your heartstrings. Like I don't put things in just to twist you. I put things in because they make me feel something.
Yeah.
And if I feel something, then you're going to feel something. One of the greatest compliments I've ever gotten is I have two children that are the toughest audience. They are the toughest. My oldest always is tough on me, but always positive about stuff. I mean, and my youngest is always not negative about things, but they're always, I got to tell you, Dad, I really, 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 really am glad that you're a good writer. Because honestly, like it would be really hard if I had to
Tell you how much you.
if I had to look at this stuff,
Yeah.
right? And he just doesn't respect. Like he is such a tough reader, and so I started writing these things for them. I started writing this sci-fi, which is like high YA, it's for people 16 and over or so, when my oldest was about 14.
Wow.
I started the idea and, developed it.
So Alexander X was actually two novellas that he had come out with really for that to start with, which became the first novella, Alexander X, with the premise being, they're great kids, they do good in school, but we really like them to know that if they could just put in enough time, they'll get great at anything.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to write a superhero story, what would be the ultimate superpower?
Yeah.
And for Edward, it was time.
Time.
It was time.
Time is the greatest superpower.
It
So
really
he
is.
gave these guys the opportunity, if they don't die, to have lived a very long time. Since they've lived so long, you can look back at history. Since they look back at history, Edward's discovering secrets about history people don't necessarily know and aren't just part of the collective normal consciousness.
Yeah.
And so it had got all these other depths, but it started out as, I'm going to show my children that if they just put in enough time, they can get great at anything.
And they can.
When you read a lot of stuff and you see a lot of film and TV, it gets to the point where you can almost say the next line when someone says something in TV. Someone says something and the other person's going to go, well, I never thought of that one, or whatever. Like you just know, like that's going to be the next line. Like you have a sense of where the story's going to go. There's just sort of generally things people say. And Edward, whenever I think he's going to zig, he zags. Whenever I think I know where that's going to go, he makes a left turn or a right turn. And so to read his stuff, I always get chills when that happens because it's so appreciative that, so many stories and you really have a good sense of like, this is what is going to happen next. And then it doesn't. And so a regular zagging
Everybody, please get the audiobooks. This is the best time to get a great listen or read. And if you like sci-fi, Edward's a wonderful writer on not just sci-fi, but he's already expanded and done TV and studio screenwriting. So he's an incredible writer. Really, really is. Are these books about spiritual ascension at all and evolving? And also, along with that, what has surprised you most about how these books have either changed or your vision in the beginning and your vision at the end?
So I think both spiritual and mental and emotional growth is what these books are about. It's like, how do you, again, if you had enough time, what would you do? How would you, if you could relive things, like if you could do things over? I mean, there's no time travel in this book, but the character that we're following, all the characters that we follow, have lived long enough where they can tell us about the past. They can tell us about the 50th time they've been in high school, or some of the older characters, like how many times they've lost loved ones, over the centuries. And so they have a different perspective that can sometimes
when you
make
choose to fall in love, when you choose to be in love, that choice now becomes a different kind of choice because that
this
with
is going to
someone who's
be
not like you. Yeah.
It's a more fleeting thing. So, it can make you callous, but it can also give you depth. And I think the thing that surprised me most about this is that I thought I could finish this in 2 books and, or 3. And, it's going to take 4 and
a novella.
And a novella. And I think, but it's funny because for the most part, there's a couple of places where this deviated from where I thought it was going to go. And I'm always grateful for when it does. But I've had the through line of this in my head pretty early on, because the general story, the idea of what would happen with this character is an overarching it's an arc that he and all of the other major characters must go through. And I think the most surprising thing is that I don't write villains. I don't write villains.
So Edward, how can we get, Lisa, Edward, how can we get a copy of this? How do we go to edwardsavio.com. We can buy
go to edwardsavio.com, at Edward Savio, pretty much on everything.
Yes. Facebook, Instagram,
Threads, what else? All of them. Basically, what is the other one? I got Blue Sky. I mean, everywhere. Everything. It's really great.
Formerly known as Instagram, Facebook.
Yeah, formerly known as all that. And you can look it up. Just if you just type in my name, Edward Savio, Savio, you will find my name.
Real quick, when you said where can you get the stuff? Yes, you can just Google his name and lots of stuff comes up. Audible has all of his audiobooks. Amazon has all of his audiobooks and his books. But also, if you go to battleforforever.com, which may or may not look embattled at this point, but battleforforever.com, the website, and just sign up with your email. And we bend over backwards to never use those emails inappropriately. People who signed up for Battle for Forever don't even get notices that we came out with Velvet Sledgehammer because it's such a different world. However, if you go there and sign up, you also get novellas. So when you were saying, what do I like about the worlds? I'll tell you right now, it's expanding. It's WandaVision and Iron Man and Black Widow. It's like everybody, it's growing. And so one of the main characters who I really love, not going to spoil anything by saying her name. Her name is Renica. Renica gets her own. Renica got her own novella, and if everything goes as planned, there will be other novellas that give short but deeper dives into specific characters that are there. And one of them is Renica, and Renica gets a lot more of a run in this latest book in League of Old, and also has her own novella. So you can get that novella right now by going to Battle for Forever.
You could also go
And
to
signing up.
edwardsavio.com and get it too. You could
Okay,
look,
there you go.
you can get it at edwardsavio.com.
Or you could
And
DM Edward Savio at any of his social medias, and that's really nice.
that's correct. I have it open. I do have my DMs open. And I do want to tell you, I interact with fans, and I love, honestly, I have had such great conversations with people, both, some critical, some, mostly, people just saying how much they love something, but they go deeper. And I'm really grateful that that the internet has in some ways lessened the veil, or lowered the veil and the mystique about writing a little bit, because every once in a while people would be like, oh my God, you answered me. And then, after 5 or 6 interactions, they're like, you know what, you should have done this. And I'm like, thanks for that. And I love when people feel empowered
Comfortable enough to rewrite your stuff for you.
to rewrite my stuff. And, I don't listen to anybody. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I have
Good.
my own vision. And,
Good.
I always tell people, don't do what they say, do what they mean. Right. Which is you listen to something, and if someone has a problem, that means there's a speed bump or a roadblock or something in the way. Usually their reasoning or their idea or their solution doesn't fit with the vision,
Right.
but they're right about that something's not right.
Yes.
And so I listen to those things all the time, and then try to find what they really are saying.
Right.
And
Take
then
out
find a
the
solution.
emotion. Take out the emotion, right, Edward?
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
more
yeah.
than that. It's more than that, AJ. It's really about whatever. Especially with development executives and producers, there's a language producers speak and there's a language writers speak. And often a producer will say, we just want you to cut the dog. And the writer, trying to do the good job for the studio, just cuts the dog. Now the screenplay has all these Swiss cheese holes in it. It just doesn't work anymore. And the only reason they said cut the dog is because they worked with a dog that was really difficult on their last project. And that's it, not because they think it's going to make the screenplay better. And so you have to understand what's behind the cut the dog comment to be able to fix the script that they'll make them happy. But it's the note behind the note. That's what it is. Taking the emotion out is one thing, but learning how to speak that, do that translation,
Language.
that's
There
the
was
hard part.
there was a
Good
project.
point.
There was a project I almost got fired off of, and because I listened and did the notes, like the way, like exactly how they said, and I ended up like, before we turned it into the studio, so that it was like, oof, I can't do anything now. They're gonna have to engage me in another draft. It had kind of gotten to the producers first, and I said, listen, don't turn this into the studio. Let me take this back and look at it. And a couple of things that they said is like, you just got to cut this whole sequence when you go out to this mansion. There's just, there's no reason to go out to this mansion. It just doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, some of the funniest, hilarious scenes happen in this sequence. And they're like, well, it doesn't work. There's just no reason to go out there. And so I listened to that afterwards, and I was like, so if I give you a reason, will that make sense? I was like, no. It just, it doesn't work. It doesn't fit. I went back. I gave an ironclad reason why we had to go to this mansion, to this set piece. And it was, if you took out this mansion now, it would rip out the heart of the story. But it was just a reason that was ironclad. And, did some rewrites and did some other stuff here and there. And I hand it back in, and they're like, that is fantastic. This works. Everything works. They were going to cut out the funniest parts of this book or
Uh,
this screenplay because I didn't have a reason.
yeah. So have a good logical.
Have a good reason. Sometimes it's
Learn how
just
to take a note. Learn how. This is
learn
a
how to,
skill.
yeah,
Was
learn
that was
how
that
to,
was that Sony or Disney?
uh, it was one of those. It was one of
Okay.
those two. One
Okay.
of those two.
Okay.
And it was, but I can tell you this. The other thing that I do is I used to do, I don't do it with my phone because it intimidates people in a bad way, but I take a digital recorder and I bring it into meetings and I put it into the center
Wow.
of things. Or I tell people I'm recording if we're doing Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
People they get 75% smarter when you put a recorder in the middle of the room.
Yeah. It's more concise and to the point.
Because they have to, because they know that what they say is now recorded.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So it's going to
And
last longer. So it's more than just a spitball and throw things out there, because when you throw things out there, authors catch it, writers catch
yeah,
it. And so you have to be so careful what you throw out there. And sometimes they're not that careful.
Right.
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 And then you get a writer back that's like, he told me to do it, but I can't, and they're not
And
going to say that in the room, right? They're just going to go, uh-huh, especially if you're intimidated and you haven't worked with a studio before or whoever you're working with, if they're the purse strings, and it's just different language.
it's a different language. Yeah, it's a different language. And the most beautiful thing I think that writers, I will never, I will never forget. And I can say this was at Disney. I was walking through the hallway, and it was our first after our first meeting, and there was a room, and I could hear these people screaming in the room, and it was writers screaming, like, "What are you talking about? Like, why are you telling me this is so wrong?" Blah blah blah. And I was just like, "Dudes, I mean, why calm down, man? It's not that chill." And after working with studio executives for a long time, I never got to the point where I would ever yell at anybody, but I
I
understood.
understand.
I understood if you couldn't, if you didn't speak up early, and then you let it like sit back and fester, that's when it turns into that kind of stuff where someone just blows up because they don't know how to communicate. So I learned early how to say,
Listen
uh,
really carefully, right, Edward?
well, listen carefully and speak my mind strongly,
Mhm.
even if the person in the room is the president of the company or the head of the studio, and
Wow.
and to not be afraid to say something, because here's the deal. You might piss someone off if you say something, like they might think you're out of line if you're like, but number one, they're paying you a lot of money to speak your mind, so speak your mind.
Yeah.
Those other people are getting paid a lot of money to give you advice as well. But the other thing is, um if you don't say something, and I mean, you're going to get fired anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You're just
Exactly.
going to get fired. You're going to get fired
Exactly.
because
And so if someone comes to you with that opportunity of give me notes, be honest with them, be authentic, you be truthful, that's caring, that's love. And if you don't, if you just say, "Oh yeah, it's great." Come on. That's not really being a true friend or a true
no,
person, right?
I always tell people this. I always say, they'll say, "This is," I go, "I know it's good. I wouldn't have handed it to you if I didn't think it was good.
Yeah.
Tell me what's wrong with it.
Yeah.
But tell me what you think is wrong with it." And
Hmm.
and when you give someone the freedom to do that, and it doesn't bother you, like, and you don't get defensive about it,
Yeah.
people can be honest. And then, as I always tell people, this is the last piece of good advice that we'll say here today, but don't take it. Don't take my advice. Um, is that when you give people that freedom, you give the people that freedom, you listen to that. Um, you also have to understand, if I can defend something, if I can't fight you on something, not fight you, but if I can't defend a problem, then to the satisfaction that it even in my own hearing, like I go, I hear that I'm defending it, but it doesn't work. Then you've got to look at it. Like, but you shouldn't just take someone's advice
No,
without
never.
trying to defend yourself, but also realize and recognize that at some point, this isn't about your ego. Like, honestly, the most the most amazing thing is having no ego, but also having a big ego. I mean, it's
You're comfortable enough with your choices that you know that you can
yeah,
make what you're doing is right, but at the same time, not letting not attaching emotion, like you said, to any feedback that you specifically get. People don't understand how important that is, because when people start giving them feedback, sometimes you don't really need to say anything to the person that's giving you feedback. It's not about them. And you don't need to go, well, what I was doing was what I was thinking was when I did that, just whatever you were thinking doesn't matter. They're giving you the feedback. Just listen, to the feedback. But it's also, the last thing about that is that when you ask someone to look for what's wrong, sometimes they'll look for things that are wrong that they wouldn't necessarily have noticed or looked for,
that's right.
because now it's their job to find something wrong.
Right, right. I mean,
That's
when someone comes to me, I always and I hope it's okay to be honest and tell everybody out there, but when someone comes to me with a script or a film project, I measure against blockbuster Hollywood movies that are successful, and no less, even on the independent level, because I want
Absolutely.
them to engage up. I want them to level up, and that's part of being true and authentic and real. And so that's so important to me. Okay, enough about me. Lisa Lindo, rocketsurgeonproductions.com. That's how people can find you, contact with you. Is that right?
Yeah, and I'm also Lindo exclusive on Instagram, and my Lisa Lindo on Facebook, because I'm old. And I'm Lisa Lindo on X because I'm old, and Threads,
Mhm.
and all kinds of places. So pretty much I'm Lisa Lindo everywhere, but Lindo exclusive on the gram, and really reachable that way. That's one of the best ways to reach me.
Wonderful. And I want
Even
to touch,
LinkedIn.
what's that?
I look at my LinkedIn even.
You're not old. I'm the same age as you, so we are young, and that's all that matters. We're young in spirit, and
Sure.
you look beautiful and gorgeous, always. And I did want to touch on the paintings behind you. What are those gorgeous pieces of art behind you?
You. I am green screened in front of a bar that has our artwork. So one of the companies that I manage is Canacity, and it's a collection of artwork from all different artists, all with the same genre. Absolutely gorgeous women. Some of them interacting with smoke, because it's 420 centric, and we're in dispensaries, and we deal with a lot of different corporations where we'll do original artwork for them whenever they need help with like logos or branding, or creating sort of a look for their business. So that's us.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for being here. And Edward, I have one more. We're going to have to start wrapping it up soon, but we're going to do our heart messages, and I'm going to ask you if you'd like to promote anything. But before that, I have one more question for you, Edward. You're a fantastic author and screenwriter, award-winning. You've done what people dream of doing, and I don't think it was easy for you. You had to put a
No.
lot of hard work into it. But what books do you love to read?
Um, I like to read a lot of different things. And Lisa, even before we got on, we're talking about this earlier today. I feel it's really important to read outside your genre. Like, if you write sci-fi, you should read romance and read, you know, and
Comic books. No, comic books.
anything. I mean,
Anything outside your
you
genre.
know, I some of my favorite books, Portnoy's Complaint. Um, I love Confederacy of Dunces, one of my all-time favorite books. Um, To Kill a Mockingbird, Catch 22. I love more modern stuff. I love reading um, a lot of fun sci-fi, and I love complicated books. I love books that, you know, um, one of my favorite things is a short story by Neil Gaiman, and it's called A Study in Emerald, I think. And what it is, it's a cross between, um, he was given an assignment, a group of people were going to write this, where you needed to write a uh, Holmesian style, Sherlock Holmesian style short story. And he took the Holmes sort of milieu and maybe the characters from it, and mixed it with uh, Lovecraft's Cthulhu sort of story, like monster story,
Ooh.
and wrote this incredibly surprising thing that, like Lisa always says, zigs when you think it's going to zag. And um and I love taking things, like when I wrote Swiss Family Rubenstein, I love taking things that are, you know, classics and twisting them. And I love bringing anything in from Shakespeare to, John Scalzi, whatever. I mean,
Mm.
going from, that's a
Red
big,
shirts.
you
I
know,
am Bob.
Yeah.
I love We Are Bob. And, I feel like what you got to do is you got to look for, um, go to your library, go to a bookstore, go to an online bookstore, and look at what some of the top things are in genres and try to read through it.
Mm.
Because honestly, like I bring straightforward comedy into my dramas. I bring straightforward sci-fi into my I into my regular everyday stories, not maybe the sci-fi itself, but what is behind the sci-fi. Like, is it about life? Is it about, you know, awakening, right?
I did want to ask both of you, what would you like? Is there anything else you'd like to promote or give a shout out to or mention?
Just buy
All
my
I
book.
want is for anybody who's made it this far to Google Edward Savio, Adward Savio, and follow him wherever you can follow him. If
Yes.
you are on social media at all and you've made it this far in this interview, just follow him. Just follow him. He drops things from stuff about writing to just funny things to interesting things that have crossed his path. Follow Edward Savio. That's it.
Absolutely.
That's what I want for as my belated birthday present.
There you go.
And Edward, how about you?
Just take a look at Velvet Sledgehammer. I think you'll find something in it that's going to be surprising, and you might learn something about yourself
Yeah.
when you read it. You'll learn certainly a lot about me.
Yes.
It's a
And
Yeah.
beautiful physical book as well as the audiobook. You can
well,
get
so many
both.
people will enjoy reading it and listening. And so, bravo, Edward, you really, and Lisa, you really have outdone yourselves. And it's phenomenal. It really, really is. So I want to say thank you so much for your time today, both of you. It's meant so much to me, and being and sharing your stories here. And now we're going to do our heart messages, okay? We're going to do our heart messages just as a prop to show everybody. And I'm going to go first. And my heart message is first of all, Happy New Year, everybody. And start this new year with a thankful and grateful heart. And this is for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a great place to be as a human being, and to have that, to be thankful and grateful for your life and those who are in it and what you have, because we're so blessed. Also, on the other hand, I do want to say, because it's a new year, let it go. Remember the Frozen? Let it go. It's a brand new year. It's a new you. Let go of the past, those things that no longer serve you, that no longer in your life, that you don't need. You've already elevated and gone forward, met great new people. So let it go. Okay, over to you, Lisa, for your heart message.
Well, I would say let it go also. So for me, the heart message for the year is it is 2024. And 2023 for a lot of people for a lot of reasons was really hard. Maybe you lost somebody, maybe you got hurt by the strike, maybe you there was damage to your property, or all of your appliances decided to die at the same time, or everyone in your family got COVID, and so you couldn't work for a while. Whatever it was that happened last year, I'm a firm believer that when you're about to get to a new level, when you're about to get to a new wonderful point in your life, a step up in the ladder, that everything on the level that you're in becomes chaotic to allow you to be uncomfortable enough to move up to that next level. And so if you haven't done it yet, honor all that stuff, that crazy stuff that happened last year, but give yourself a moment, whether it's to write some of it down and burn the messages, or give yourself a meditation and get yourself away from everybody else and visualize everything that happened last year that may or may not completely have followed the goals that you set for yourself, and picture it within your hands in a globe and just get rid of it.
Yes.
It's gone. And it's you've used what you needed to, and now everything else is possible and brand new. And that's my love message for this year.
I love it. Thank you so much. I love that. I love, love, love that. And so beautifully said as well. And thank you, Lisa. Thank you. You are truly one of a kind, and you're absolutely amazing. I adore you. I love you to the moon and back. And I know I really, really do. I really do. Edward, over to you.
So my message would be, and this is to myself and to anybody listening, you know, we always think that, like, you've said a lot of nice things about me tonight and today. Um, but I didn't get here because I I mean, I've been privileged in my life, but I didn't start with anything. I worked pretty hard. But every single person, no matter where they are, even if they're successful, it's hard. It's hard to do what we do. And so if you're struggling and you think that it's easy for the people that you're seeing that are already where you might want to be, just know that we're struggling too. That, it takes longer to write things. It We have things we throw out. We have lots of failures all the time. And so uh, look at your failures as positives. They're just steps to where you need to be. And,
Mm.
it's it's so important, I think, for people who are doing what they want to do and who are putting out things out into the world. Acknowledge to those who are struggling to put those things out or trying to be the next generation coming up, that it ain't easy.
Right,
And
right.
you may feel like you're failing, but that's a great thing. Like, honestly, I always feel like I'm on the edge of failure. And that's because I'm trying something that's not easy. I'm doing something that I'm not just doing the same thing I did last time. So anytime you push yourself beyond where you already are, you're going to feel uncomfortable. And so my message to myself every year is that anything that I do, it might take longer than I think, but I'm always going to be proud when that thing gets put out into the world. So,
Amazing, amazing. And I love that so, so much, Edward. Brilliant. And it's so true. Well, I want to thank you both for being here, for your time and your presence and all your beautiful shares and stories today. And I love you both. And with that, I want to wish you a happy, blessed rest of the new year. And you'll always be my friends and your family. And until we meet again, au revoir, arrivederci.
I'm your fan.
oh, nice.
Thank you. I'm your
Thank
fan
you.
too.